Hi, everybody. It's Jonny Enoch here, and we are back with more great shows for you for 2023. I do want to apologize that we were off the air for the last couple of weeks, and that is because, as many of you know, I live in Budapest, Hungary, over in Europe, but I still come to Canada where I have an office and a place to do work in North America. So every couple of months, I'll do shows over here and I'll travel around, and I still have a lot of family and friends out this way. But what really gets me coming this way is the jet lag. And when I go over that way, I've usually found that I can acclimate pretty quickly. And yes, the functional mushrooms and vitamin B and all that sort of stuff does help. My naturopathic doctor told me the other day that actually taking cortisol is a way of biohacking so that you can trick your body's circadian rhythms very quickly within a day or two to bounce back from jet lag. But at the same time I was battling this, I caught some sort of stomach bug. So it was a very challenging beginning of the year, but in a way, it was all for the greater good. As everything I look at in my life, I look at it as something good. There's always a surprise or a rainbow that is at the end of the storm, right? So I started implementing intermittent fasting, been going to the gym more, been cleansing, meditating, and really focused, as we all should be right now, on becoming the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And I think that's how we can be of service to the world, service to others. And that is a beautiful thing. I want to get right into some important announcements, but first, I want to thank our dear friend Michelle Hood at Light the Light Pyramids. She sent me out some very special orgone pyramids, all sorts of them. This is a beautiful piece that I've been keeping by my bed, and I've noticed my dreams have increased. And you'll notice that it's not only made of quartz, but there's a sphere in there, which she took around Egypt and she charged it up. And we will do a show on orgone pyramids and Reich and how that all works. But you'll notice that this sort of conductivity of energy at the bottom with the pellets and the copper really brings things together and charges it into its geometrical shapes. And of course, she sent along some for Shoshana and many others. They're absolutely beautiful. I do recommend you go to Light the Light Pyramids. And she gave us a coupon code that you can use, which is JE15. That's like Jonny Enoch 15. And all of my listeners out there will get 15% off, which is fantastic. Thank you so much, Michelle. I do love these. She sent me so many of them. They're absolutely fantastic. And we do want to give a shout out to Neurobuddha. And they have been very helpful to me as I've been getting things back on track. I've had many friends that have been sending a lot of healing energy. Thank you, Simone. Thank you to all of you out there. I really appreciate you. And things are really back on track. I'm feeling good. And I take these every day. You can get them at neurobuddha.com, and you can use the coupon code ENOCH20 at checkout, and that will get you 20% off. I am going to give you guys some updates today, as we mentioned, but we're also going to talk about some future scenarios. If any of you have ever heard me come on shows like Jimmy Church and Jay Widener, I've often given you these debriefings when I get them from the people I talk to that are in the know, that are very connected, and they've been involved with either unacknowledged or special access programs. Well, I have been given some warnings and messages for what's coming up in the near future, and I thought that we would talk about them here. And as we get into our updates today, I should say that we have some great conferences coming up. And if you do get a chance to come out to one of these conferences or tours, please come up and say hello. I do love to meet all of you, connect with you, and hear your stories. And I often hear people say that they love shows like Mystery Teachings or the Alaska Triangle. And that is the best part about these particular events. But coming up, we have the Conscious Life Expo. And I will be giving a keynote talk on the first night. That's going to be very interesting on the Anunnaki Atlantis and the Babylonian Stargates. You do not want to miss that. We're going to be talking about all kinds of new sciences and whistleblowers I talked to that we actually flew out to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to a fellow that contacted me that said he was dying of cancer, that had been involved with these programs, a veteran. And these folks, including his friend, revealed some incredible things that we're going to be discussing and revealing, along with some discoveries that Timothy Hogan and I made on our recent trips to Egypt. So you don't want to miss that. That will be from February 10th through the 13th. That is in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton. And if you all can make it out there, I'm also going to be on a panel with Jimmy Church, and we have a workshop that we're also doing with some really fascinating subjects. And of course, we also have Contact in the Desert this year. That will be from June 25th through the 28th. You don't want to miss that event with some amazing speakers. And then I'll be back in the UK for the Awakening Expo 2023. It's also going to be part of the Forbidden Knowledge Tour with Billy Carson. We have an amazing lineup at that event, and that is going to be in Manchester from August 25th to the 27th. I will be presenting an all-new talk that you guys have never heard before. Of course, I always bring all new material, and I always want to give it my best every single time. At this particular talk, I'll be talking about all different types of extraterrestrials, what we know about them, what we don't know about them, classified documents and stuff that will blow your mind. So make sure you are there for that event. I also want to tell you all about our Initiation into the Mysteries of Egypt tour. That is going to be in March 2023. Believe me, folks, you do not want to miss this tour. It's going to be very special. We can't even tell you all the things that are going to happen on this tour, the permissions, the knowledge, what the initiations really are and how that works. You just have to know that when you bring a group like this together, the type of people that we have coming, this is going to be truly life-changing. It's going to be amazing in every way. And you can find out about it by going to www.jonnyenoch.com, or you can go to sabatours.com. That's SABA tours.com. You can register still. We still have a few spaces left. And if you join us on that tour, it's all luxury accommodations. There's a Nile cruise, which is absolutely beautiful at night when you're sitting around with all your new friends up on the deck with amazing food. And you're looking at this African moon above you, shining down on these gorgeous temples lit up at night as you're moving down the ancient Nile, and the energy is moving through you. It's a transformational experience, one that you will never forget. And I strongly urge you to go there if you've ever felt in your heart the drawing, the calling, the longing to go to those sacred lands. I highly recommend it. We also want to tell you all about these upcoming shows that we have. I'm very excited about them. I just got off the phone the other day with Tim, the tactical advisor from Gaia's Cosmic Disclosure. And it turns out he and I have known each other for over 10 years, and we attended a clinical hypnotherapy workshop together over 10 years ago. And it's something I guess all of you probably know about me, that I practiced clinical hypnotherapy for many years, and I have a background in my education that is with counseling. But with Tim, he had a very keen interest in that as well. We have a great show coming up where we will be discussing gray extraterrestrials and their involvement here. That's going to be a fascinating show. And we will have Rick Doty come on the show to talk about classified Egypt and all the other shows we discussed. And I just did some recordings, not only with Derek White's Sky Cloud talking about aliens and prophecy. You're going to want to check that out as well. And we also have some new Hans Dietrich shows coming, very exciting, on the Saturn mysteries. And he also did a Dropa Stones Part 2 that we can't wait to air these for all of you. And now that we're back on and we're rolling, we're coming at you hard. We have so much great new material and guests. I'm really excited for what we're going to do here in 2023. But as I mentioned, I also want to share with you all some future scenarios about the direction we're heading in. And I want to give you guys some things to think about. I do get to talk to insiders and sources I have. And this happens when you put yourself out there and you travel around and you're in the company of extraordinary people. I don't get to talk to them all the time. I do get to ask questions about what's going on in the world and certain things that are from behind the scenes. And as I've told you all before, this channel and our show is not just about ancient historical mysteries or the esoteric. It's also about the future. We're looking at it constantly. We're analyzing it as we're moving through space. And I think that's really fascinating. And I just want to give you all an admonishment that as I talk about these things today, and I tell you about what I've heard, I do so from a neutral position. I don't want to tell you how to think or what you should think. And I want to present it so you can do your own research. And that way we know the direction we're headed. I also want you to think about the world that you live in and who you are and why you're here. Time is a sentient existence. It exists because we are self-aware. This is called lineal progression. It literally continues on against us and with us. So this universe that we are existing in, it not only is a machine to evolve and grow souls, but your existence here on Earth is not an accident. And I want you all to think about that. I also want you to think about the fact of how polarizing everything is. You know, when we look at the yin and the yang, the black and the white, the positive and the negative, the hot and the cold, the right brain and the left brain, there's this duality of things, this binary aspect. And we can look at what our astrophysicists teach us. If we go back to what they tell us in the universe cosmologically, they say that the universe started as a hydrogen atom, and then we added a proton and an electron. Well, the same is true of light with photons. It exists with a particle and a wave. And in fact, we can start to unlock some of the greater mysteries of our reality when we look at what we call a superposition, or we could start to look at a type of time travel through that. It's a very interesting duality we live in. But when we talk about time, and I want to start talking about time to bring up about some of the directions of where we're headed in the future. But when we talk about time, I'm reminded of a very ancient curse, a curse from the ancient world that comes from the Chinese and the Sanskrit. And that curse is, may you be reborn with the blessing of the gods and eternal life, so you will have all the pleasures and satisfaction you desire forever. Now that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But that's actually the worst curse you could give someone in the ancient world. And if you think about it, all the pain or trials and tribulations you might go through in this life, they can propel you, they can fuel you. It's like it says in the Holy Scriptures, he hath poured the cup with the bitter and the sweet. So you are taking from your drink the good and the bad throughout life. And this is how we have to progress through things. If I were to take one of you right now, and anybody out there, and I said, look, let's go to another universe. Let's use quantum machining. Let's take 4 or 5 molecules. Let's create our own universe, and there was no time there. You could have all the pleasures, and you could have all the satisfaction, and everything you wanted, and you go there, you would be bored to tears. You'd be wanting to leave that existence because 10 billion years would seem like 10 seconds. So the reason I'm telling you all of this is not only are we going to enter a period of our humanity, and we're going to enter a period here on Earth where our lifespans are going to increase eventually, but also we have to realize that no matter what happens in our world, all the changes that we're going through, whether it's wars, whether it's sociological and economic challenges, that this is all finite. It's all in temporality. It's all for your growth and evolution. And that's why each and every single one of us is here. And that's why we have to keep in mind what is the true purpose of our existence as we go through this. You know, the nature of existential extremes within ourselves is where we get in this existence of duality. It's all about our growth and evolution. I want to talk to you all about our home here in the solar system. I know a lot of people out there want to know about is there a life on other planets and what's out there. And the truth be told, I've asked this question many times over of my insiders and the people I talk to. And what they tell me is that there is life all over our solar system, on the different moons, in fact. And I've told you all before that on Europa, when we look at Jupiter's moon, there is more water on Europa than there is on all of Earth, in all of our ocean. There's more water up there, and there's these enormous whale-like creatures you will find out about. And eventually you'll find out about a crashed craft on the side of Mercury. You will find out about settlements in the asteroid belt, that there are colonization programs and people living all over the various moons, and they have quite active societies. And one day it'll be apparent to many of you that we have actually been colonizing Mars since the 1950s, as strange as that sounds. But in the conversations I've had about this, it's not quite as fancy as it looks in the movies. On Mars, there are areas that have water, and they are deep as the Marianas Trench, but the oxygen levels are not as high. It can be almost like going up in Everest into some areas, and that's due to the fact that they can't really have a great atmosphere due to the gravity levels that we find there. But there is life all over our solar system. There is life all over our galaxy. And if you go 10,000 light years in any direction, you will find that there are over 20 million solar systems. In fact, there are more planets in our galaxy than there are grains of sand on all of our beaches on Earth. So keep that in mind, that we are not alone, and that what we're doing on Earth here is a great zoological experiment. All of you are being monitored. We're like an ant farm. And I will tell you that eventually we will find out the truth about extraterrestrials. You're being drip fed certain pieces of information constantly, but everything we're going through on Earth right now is all part of the plan. Those folks up there know all about it. And there's not just one group that is interacting with us. Every group on Earth, every government on Earth is getting interacted with. Think about it. Eisenhower, he was meeting with extraterrestrials. Prince Philip met with extraterrestrials. We've had popes in the past that have met with ET groups. They've had talks with them. The Germans, we hear about they were exchanging Aldebaran technology. The Chinese, definitely. And I'll tell you, as we move into these upcoming changes in the world, and we're going to get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about Russia, what's happening about that, and some of the updates I've had. But as you know, Xi Jinping's plan, there's a lot of plans in the world that by 2049, China is going to be having a mass expansion around the world. They're obviously in an exchange program with various ETs and groups, but all these different groups on Earth, they're doing exchanges with different groups that have agendas, and sometimes they all get together and we have various global economic projects on Earth. Now, some of the stuff you've seen, these biogenetic technologies on Earth that are experimented on us with, that comes from ETs. I just had a great conversation with Tim, the tactical advisor, about this. And what he told me is that a lot of these biogenetic technologies, they were developed by the Greys. And the Greys will actually sell them or trade them to different groups in developing planets, solar systems, and areas. And the Greys, well, as we'll get into on that show, and I've discussed this before, they're a very complicated group. They're a time-traveling species. And I've explained to you all before the idea of quantum multiplicity. Not only are they an invasive species, but the Greys, we have to differentiate them. You have the traditional Eben Greys, which are extraterrestrial biological entities, and you have the Greys that are a little more sophisticated, you could say, that have gotten rid of their bodies and their physiologies. The Ebens, and remember, these guys come from the Orion star system. The Ebens, they are about 300 or 400 years ahead of us. But the other Greys can be millions of years ahead of them. And they're actually at war with each other. And in some cases, they've shattered paradoxical time streams. You're dealing with like a 5D chess here with all sorts of paradoxes and changes that is very it's quite complex. There's many cooks in the kitchen affecting us, and it's changing constantly, like one of those Japanese sword makers that is putting edge after edge after edge after edge on, and it's coming from every direction. Truth be told, the algorithm for reality is quite complex, and the same is what happens on Earth. I was told to tell you all that one thing that we should be aware of is when we talk about these guys and when we talk about their agendas and what is brought out here, a lot of what they have comes from AI, by the way. There's an artificial intelligence that, just like the financial, stock market, real estate divisions of their organization, they use a system called Aladdin that you can all look up. They take a lot of their directions from an AI that tells them, certain decisions to make in the world and where we're headed, which is all very fascinating. But one thing I was told that you all should be aware of is the social urbanization programs. This is something you want to all look into and become aware of and start looking at it very closely. They've started to build these in Australia and they're moving them into Europe, and they are about a square kilometer, and you have this horizontal stretch of buildings and urbanization that can hold about 10 to 12,000 humans. And the idea with these, as even Saudi Arabia is now talking about building this strip, this very futuristic strip. The idea of this is to say that due to the changes, not only of climate and everything else in the world, that along with the centralized digital currencies that are coming in the future and what we call a social credit score, that you would be limited by your movements to where you could go. The idea with this also is to implement an AI into everybody's house, like an AI control center, that even in the future, after the 2030s, when you went to go have a bowel movement or you went to go use the toilet, that it would analyze someone's fecal matter to see what their diet is like, to see if their social credit score permits them to be able to eat something in particular so it does not burden the health system. These are the types of technologies and things that we're getting at. And I've said this before, and I've asked about this in the briefings that I've had about future scenarios, that really, not only are we moving into an era, folks, when you're not going to have regular smartphones, you're going to take a piece of technology very soon in the future that you'll snort up your nose. It will tap into your neural networks. And this is how you will interface with phone calls, the internet, everything else. You could be in the middle of a movie theater. You could be sitting there watching a show, and you could be taking a call, interfacing with a friend, and it's all going to be showing up in your head. You'll be able to hear things. The days of having these hardwired technologies are gone, as well as the materials that we use, let's say, to make Teslas and electric cars. You look at cobalt, all these things, all those materials are running out. And there is going to be a period where we'll enter where they are going to tell you that we have to go into self-driving cars, and that the types of foods available in the future, especially by the end of the 2030s, you're going to start to hear all about 3D printed and lab-grown meats. This is going to be a part of what is being rolled out. And there's going to be a number of changes happening over the next 15 years as we're going to see tremendous ups and downs. I've mentioned to you all before that 2024, 25 are going to be milestone years. There's going to be a lot of changes to our economies, and you'll see the introduction more of the legislation for centralized digital currencies. And as we move to the end of this decade, I do believe you'll start to see more about infertility and sterility. We will find that you'll need in the future almost the equivalent of a QR code that will be associated with the social credit system. And this will be attributed to if a person qualifies to have a family, or if you want to make a baby, that one of the privileges that you will inherit in the future is to do so from your own DNA, that you won't even need a partner. And that will be an incredible milestone that we're going to actually reach. By 2032, there will be a lot of changes and upheavals in the world, and some of these economic changes that we're having will lead off into the 2030s, I'm told. 2045, these are major milestone years. In 2049, ultimately, I want to tell you that this will all carry on this transitionary period for the human family into 2085 when things finally start to settle down. But in the 2040s, you're going to find that we're going to be talking a lot about life extension. And the reason they're going to have to do this is not only because our reproduction rates are going to go down, but when it first becomes available, you are going to find that it will be available only to the very wealthy. And then after that, it will be available to everybody. And here's what I've been told about the life extension technologies and how they work. And I've told you all this before. How they're going to work is that they're going to take something that Ray Kurzweil from Google, their chief futurist, talks about. It's called a foglet. It's a 1 atom thick silicon hexagonal structure that moves into the mitochondria of your cells, and it not only keeps it from degrading with the telomeres, but this nanotechnology, it essentially will move along the geosynchronistic orbits of the body. It works very much like today's mRNA technology. The mRNA, by the way, comes from them. It's a Hungarian scientist, though, that is credited for. And I want to tell you that they will perfect it. The problem that you probably have heard that's coming out of the news that people were having a lot of side effects and problems was actually the adjuvant that they used as a great experiment on us. But the technology that will be used in the future for life extension will cause an equilibrium stasis when we look over at the telomeres. It's going to break the threshold. And what you'll find is that a person that's 150 years old, for example, that was to take one of these injections full of nanoparticles, there's no difference between them biologically and someone who's 1,500 years old. That's what I was told by someone in the know. And as soon as you get this injection, you could be like 90 years old, have wrinkles all over you, and be an older person, and you'll go back right to your body's state when you were in the best condition, your cellular structure. You'll look like whether it was in your 20s or 30s, you'll go back to that age, and that technology will become available. What we have to remember about our position on this planet and that we're here, if we go back to the dinosaurs, let's say 65 million years ago, whatever period you want to look at, when the event came that wiped out the dinosaurs, I want to ask you all, why didn't it wipe out the alligators or the crocodiles and their other relatives that are very similar to them? If it hit one area, let's say it hit Mexico, it caused this great event on Earth. Why didn't it wipe out everything? And the answer is simple. Obviously, it was not their time here anymore. They had progressed at a certain level. Let's say human beings, and a lot of us that come from different places, and we all have a purpose here. We're all evolving together. There's a reason we're here. And this is a great zoological experiment, as I mentioned. Do you not think that they were removed on purpose? Something went around the planet and completely took them out. And I don't believe anything ever goes extinct. I believe they were moved. Their time was up on Earth. So what you'll find is that our destiny is in the stars. Our descendants are going to leave this planet. And that is going to happen in the 2040s. And what I've been told about this is that it will start to begin. There are going to be these large ships, almost like cruise ships, that will start taking people off and colonizing them in other areas. I'm not talking about Mars necessarily. Mars has been a project that they are working on, but I'm talking about places that are closer in likeness to Earth. And how that's going to work, I've been told, is not only through a type of harmonic oscillation, but if you guys want to research something that is going to give you a lot of clues about some of these technologies, look up transverse sound waves. When you look up transverse sound waves as opposed to longitudinal sound waves, you're going to find out a great deal about what we're going to do. Essentially, it's going to take longer to put your seatbelt on in a craft, as it does, as I've been told by folks in these programs. It takes longer to put their seatbelt on than it does to get to the destination. And what they do is they take matter, space, and lineal proportional distance, and it transpositions them somewhere else. So essentially, you're just reconfiguring where you are. It's a transpositioning of where we're headed. And that is a fascinating thing, the type of technology we're looking at. I also would like to point out what's happening right now in Europe. There's a lot of people very worried about that. And also, we've discussed before about the potential of these Poseidon missiles and what could be happening in Europe in the future. There is some bit of good news. I've been told that the forces that are protecting us, the good forces in the world, let's say our militaries, they have put up a sort of missile defense system, especially when we go and look up into the Baltic areas or even in Lithuania and places where they could deflect certain attacks. I do want to talk about the unfortunate situation of what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. There is a very unfortunate situation, and I know it firsthand because I do live in Budapest a lot of the time, and I'm well aware of what the Ukrainians say that come out in those ways. We know that there have been challenges within Crimea and Donbass and these settlements. And with Putin, I have been told by the folks I talked to that he is legitimately sick. He does have cancer, but he does have 3 official doubles, but I'm told the number is actually more like 8. And this situation can change at any time. Of course, Xi Jinping, he does play a role in this as well. At any time, if he decided to move in, he could use micro swarming drones, take out various satellite systems. They could switch to 9G above, and all of communication for everyone would be locked out. And this could present all sorts of difficulties geopolitically in that particular area. But any time, if any changes were to take place between Russia and the Ukraine, the rest of Europe, including where I live most of the time, you'd have 30 minutes notice until everything is locked down, which is not an ideal situation as we see things in the world transform. We know that energy prices are changing. Electricity is changing around the world. There are all kinds of new developments. That doesn't mean that the world is going to stop. It means that we're going to evolve. In the next 20 years, there will be all kinds of changes across Eastern Europe and the rest of the world. And I do believe you're going to continue to see these unfold, but it is all happening for the greater progress of humanity. And believe me, there's a lot of other influences coming in constantly. I am aware that we will still have a government in the United States. There will be governments in Canada. There's going to be some changes to various parts. But as far as the United States goes, I would say in the near future, the Four Corners is still the safest place to be for population density, to stay, to say it mildly, the coastal cities are always, the most challenging. But coming back to Russia, the folks I talk to are more concerned about Medvedev and what his actions are going to be. Because if you recall, there's a few years ago when he had a briefcase that opened up and some documents about UFOs and extraterrestrials spilled out, which is really quite fascinating. I also would say that we shouldn't take our eye off Putin yet at this particular point. He does have large underground facilities, and these large underground facilities that they're like cities. There were billions of dollars, and he's got one in Mongolia, for example. There's some in Argentina. They're around the world. Putin is one of the richest guys in the world. And as I mentioned before, there's areas even in Argentina where there's a complete underground area that has a replica of Washington, D.C. for the layout that's under it in various layers. The default capital of the United States, by the way, is in Colorado. And I've mentioned that before. It's in the Rockies. And this is for security reasons as well, that should something go wrong, the commander-in-chief and everyone else will go up there to the Denver airport underneath it. That's why you got all the apocalyptic stuff on the walls and piles of dirt everywhere out in the fields that they were taking from drilling. People go under the Denver airport and they go 40 miles west of there, I think it is. They go into the Rockies, and there you have an incredible setup for a new government. And that's why not only has Freemasonry moved their records up there and their operations, moved them out of DC, but a lot of these organizations like FEMA and everyone else has moved in that particular direction. I also got a chance to ask about various classified knowledge and technologies that have been hidden in Egypt. And we will be getting into that with Rick Doty on an upcoming show. But I was told that under the Giza Plateau, most certainly when they were exploring the Osiris shafts originally, and below that, there were all sorts of, I want to say, consciousness technologies that were used for building and moving things. And this was greatly suppressed. Of course, the Antiquities was involved in removing those, and then the area was flooded. And what is really interesting on the takeaway of that for me was, not only have we talked about these rods before that could be used by the likes of Tutmosis III, as we see in the annals of the king, of his treasury and other things, you see depictions of them using these rods, or even holding rods in their statues that looks like a circle and a square for a positive and a negative, that they could use like a harmonic basin to use anti-gravitics, like an anti-gravity field, to move blocks effortlessly. Well, what's really interesting about that, I was told that how they would cut granite and cut into it was actually through a type of crystal that's believed to be one of these technologies, these lost ancient technologies, that was removed. And the crystal, when harmonics were used, it would have a precise way of directing that energy to be able to cut almost like a laser right through granite. That's not how they did the hieroglyphics. In my conversations with Timothy Hogan, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, who's a dear friend of mine, he has not only revealed but also lectured on this at the Getty Museum, that how the hieroglyphics were done is through a type of chemistry the Egyptians understood to make hydrofluoric acid. And they would do so through the thorny plant that grew around the temples. And Timothy has demonstrated that it can eat through granite, and they'd use a stencil. And then after the stencil was used, they'd wash it away, and you can use water and other means and to stop it from eating through further. But they had a tremendous understanding of these type of sciences. And this also may in fact have included, as we know, the transpositioning of consciousness. So there's all sorts of fascinating things in Egypt. And as we've discussed as well, Egypt has an Area 51 called Zayet El Arian, that is an unfinished pyramidal complex that's near Abu Sir and Abu Ghurab. And it has a complex underneath it the size of New York City. Aircraft can come and go from it without being seen. Things are brought there. It's been guarded by British and American military since the 1950s. And what folks tell me when I'm out for dinner with them, with people in important positions, they tell me there's still a real live active Stargate down there that scares the hell out of them, that they cannot explain. And all it appears is like this aurora borealis of colors coming out of the ground. Very strange stuff. There's many, many mysteries in Egypt to be discovered. And remember, that's why Stalin went there, spent all his money. Khrushchev, all that stuff about the Soviet friendship monument that they built. They flooded those areas out. They found someone known as the Visitor and all sorts of folks and things in their digs that's truly remarkable. There are all kinds of changes happening in the world, and it's an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to discuss these subjects. And I just want to tell you all that we do not have to have fear moving into the future. We're all awakening to our true potential. We're realizing that the greatest thing we can do right now is to better ourselves, to work on ourselves, to get in shape, to feel good, to meditate, to pay attention to the people that we love and take care of them and those around us, and prepare for all the amazing things we have ahead. I want to thank you for listening to today's show, and we have many exciting guests coming up. Remember to like, subscribe, comment down below, share this video with your friends, and I'll talk to you all in the next episode.